Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
What do you think today? We live in a challenging world. What do you think are some of the major challenges that face organizations around HR? I'm not just speaking about HR people. I'm speaking about the broader business community and organizational life. What are some of the big people-related challenges they face today that maybe wasn't true 20 years ago or 10 years ago?
Broadly speaking, there are some common ethical and also legal challenges that businesses face, and they are equally applicable for HR world also. A lot of time there are situations when all available options to make a decisions may not result in an ethical or fair outcome for everybody. Let me give you an example. Let's say my company has 500 employees, and I must do some cost savings. And I have two options: either lay off 50 employees or reduce salary of all employees, let's say by 10% or 15%. Now, I don't want to exercise either of those options, but a lot of time the situation compels leaders to make a decision.
My name is William J. Rothwell. You can call me Bill, and I'm delighted today to be conducting an interview with Dr. Sohel Imroz, and I will let him introduce himself, but first I'll introduce myself as moderator. I'm William J. Rothwell. As I said, I'm a distinguished professor at Penn State University in workforce education and development, where I teach courses in organization development and change, and in workforce development like training, employee training. And Sohel, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, sir. My name is Sohel Imroz. I have been Assistant Professor of Human Resource Management at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, located in Daytona Beach, Florida. I've been here since 2017. And before joining academia, I worked both in the IT and human resource fields for almost 20 years. I completed my PhD from Penn State in 2016, and the following year I started here at Embry-Riddle. So,
okay, great. Well, can you share with me a little bit about your own personal professional journey into the field? In other words, how did you get into it to begin with? You mentioned you spent nearly 20 years in HR and related field, but how did that get started? How did you move into HR?
well, actually, my very first job after college was actually a COBOL programmer. So I had background in computer science. So right after completing my bachelor's degree, I got a job as a COBOL programmer back in 1998. So I spent a few years as a developer. Then my role started to shift more towards business analysis and project management. So over the years, as I became more senior in my role, then I started working more and more as a business analyst and as a project manager. When I started working as a project manager, then I started to encounter many people-related issues. For example, setting goals and objectives for my project team members, hiring my team members. Some of them were developers, testers, other business analysts, system analysts, and so forth. I had to do their performance evaluation. I had to deal with their personality. There were team conflict in many cases. Some of the teams I was a part of were quite effective. Some of them were downright dysfunctional. There were communication problems, there were leadership issues. Now, all of those issues are very common in HR world. And anytime you deal with people-related issues, those topics come up. So as a project manager, as my project team started to grow, this type of people-related issues started to, I started to encounter them more frequently. And as a matter of fact, I enjoyed dealing with people-related issues more and more than dealing with customers, gathering requirements or dealing with the developers on technical issues. So that's when my interest started to gradually shift from towards the HR world. And then I completed my master's program in business administration, and then I started working on the PhD program at Penn State on organizational development. So that's when the shift finally happened.
Okay. Well,
I started from so over the years I had a chance to work with in the HR roles in the IT field, but more and more the shift became towards the HR world.
Okay. My own journey was more convoluted than that. I started out in a PhD program in English, and I completed it, completed all courses required for the PhD. But then I discovered that there were no job openings. But I had been teaching business and technical writing for 5 years, and there I was teaching students how to prepare resumes, how to do job interviews, how to deal with prospective employers. And when I decided to leave the field of English and enter HRD, training and development, and OD, I found a new program at the University of Illinois, Urbana. I transferred into that program, also at the same time signed up for an MBA program, and started looking for a job, found one with the state of Illinois, and became a trainer in business and technical writing for the state. But I was not in that job very long before I got a promotion to be a full training director for a full government agency. And from there, I was with the government and then eventually moved to a multinational company to take charge of their training, employee relations, recruiting, and other functions, eventually moving to Penn State as a professor and privately working as a consultant. So in the more recent years, I've been running different companies as not just consulting companies, but my wife and I bought a motel and we also rent rental homes. So that being said, that's a bit about the two of us. Let me direct it back to you, Sohel, and ask, what are some of the common ethical and legal challenges businesses face regarding HR and HR compliance?
Sure. Some of the challenges that I have personally encountered, and many HR people personally encounter, the lack of knowledge of current federal and state regulations. Okay, as an HR professional, we are not lawyers, but there are many federal laws and state laws, depending on the issues at hand, that HR professionals need to be quite familiar. I mean, more than rudimentary knowledge, but they have to really have a thorough understanding. It does not have to be expert level knowledge, but at least basic level knowledge they should have about the federal laws for sure. And depending on what kind of issues they are dealing with, some state level laws also apply. For example, the Civil Rights Act, Pregnancy Anti-Discrimination Act, OSHA, then ADEA, Age Discrimination in Employment Act, Americans with Disability Act. Those are all federal level issues, federal level laws that HR personnel must be familiar with. In addition to those, depending on issues such as drug testing, different states have different level of procedures and requirements in those.
Right.
So those need to be taken into consideration as well. A lot of time, you will see that HR people, they kind of are the middle management or mid-level, not mid-level, but they are in the middle between the employees and the employers. especially those industries where, for example, aviation industry, where it is there are a lot of labor unions active. So the HR people a lot of time work as an intermediary between the labor union and the management. So those kind of issues, the HR people also need to be taken into consideration. And most of the cases, the HR people are like the first point of contact if there is any employee related problem or employee related questions come up. Employees usually go to the HR people in the first point of contact. So being able to show empathy with those employees, being able to listen to them and provide them with proper direction, those would be some of the requirements, some of the responsibilities that HR people would be expected to perform. So,
yeah, I would agree with you. And unfortunately, a lot of business majors aren't given the proper training while they are in either undergraduate school, or if they pursue a master's degree in business, like an MBA, they aren't given proper training on what kind of interview questions are permissible to ask and how that may differ depending on different jurisdictions. You're absolutely right that things like drug testing can be different in different jurisdictions. For example, in some states, you can't do drug testing before people are employed. You have to wait until after they join the organization. In other organizations, they have to be drug screened before employment. So there are many key issues that HR people have to be kept aware of.
yes.
And unfortunately, I'd ask your opinion about this. What do you think about the level of professionalism in HR itself? It's been my experience that about 2/3 of HR people are promoted from within their organizations, and they may be given some rudimentary training around their job duties, whatever they're tasked to do in HR, but they're not given training on where their role fits within the larger structure of HR. So, for example, someone hired as a payroll clerk may get training on payroll, but they're never told about all the other elements of HR. And the same is true for recruiters and trainers and employee relations people and so forth. What do you think about the level of professionalism in HR?
First thing I'd like to mention that HR field is not as regulated as some other fields like the medical doctors. So if you want to be a medical doctor, then you have to, there are some professional ethics guidelines, requirements that you have to uphold. And failing to do that have severe consequences from professional level, from government level. Unlike that, the HR professionals do not have a legally mandated code of ethics, per se. The code of ethics in the HR field is, I mean, different organizations have different code of ethics. But Society of Human Resource Management, they have done a very good job in identifying and solidifying a broad range of code of ethics for HR professionals in particular. But if an HR professional fails to uphold those code of ethics, then there is, the consequences are not as severe nearly as we see for medical doctors and some other regulated professions. Now, Society of Human Resource Management has several key components of code of ethics for HR professionals, for example, that deals with their professional responsibility, their professional development, ethical leadership, the concept of fairness and justice, conflict of interest, use of information comes to mind. So these are the fundamental components of code of ethics that any HR professional should uphold. And we can find details information about those from the Society of Human Resource Management on their website and their publications. So that is something definitely should be the very first step for any HR professional to diligently exercise those guidelines. And I think that would be a very good very good starting point for any HR professional towards ethical conduct and responsibilities.
Okay. What do you think today? We live in a challenging world. What do you think are some of the major challenges that face organizations around HR? I'm not just speaking about HR people. I'm speaking about the broader business community and organizational life. What are some of the big people-related challenges they face today that maybe wasn't true 20 years ago or 10 years ago?
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Broadly speaking, there are some common ethical and also legal challenges that businesses face, and they are equally applicable for HR world also. A lot of time there are situations when all available options to make decisions may not result in an ethical or fair outcome for everybody. Let me give you an example. Let's say my company has 500 employees, and I must do some cost savings. And I have two options: either lay off 50 employees or reduce salary of all employees, let's say by 10% or 15%. Now, I don't want to exercise either of those options, but a lot of time the situation compels leaders to make a decision. Now, we have utilitarian approach, the rights approach, the fairness or justice approach, which are likely to guide us to make a decision that might be ethical. Okay? For example, if I use utilitarian approach, that means I want to do most amount of good to most amount of people. So in that case, I would say, you know what, if I lay off 50 employees, then I can still save 450 other employees. So that, for some leaders, that would be an easy choice. But some other people, from some other leaders who do not want to exercise that approach and they want to infringe as little rights as possible for all employees. So in that case, they may say that, you know what, I prefer reducing salary of all employees by 10%, but at least no one will lose their job. So that is another approach that may affect their decision making. In addition to the situation itself, there might be challenges that compels individuals to whether they want to maintain their integrity or they want to maintain their loyalty. So there is you have to make a decision between integrity and loyalty, between individual interest versus group interest, whether you want to benefit short-term basis or in a long-term basis. So those are different types of situations or factors that will affect individuals' decision making, and those are challenges. Another, the last part of your question, when you mentioned the type of issues that are being encountered more on a present basis that were not in the 20 years or 30 years ago. One of them I would like to mention is the bias of employees. Now, especially employees and HR people, there are a lot more researches going on unconscious bias, that people even know that they are being biased. I'm sure you are familiar with the Harvard study on unconscious bias or implicit bias.
Right.
Employees or anybody can participate, and those kind of studies allude to raise awareness that there are another world of biases that we are not even aware of. So how do we encounter them that we don't even know that exist? So
right.
Those type of issues are being more prominent in the workplace. And of course, there is diversity, equity, and inclusion, the DEI related topics that are getting a lot more attention last few years compared to a couple of decades.
What do you think about the controversy swelling around diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging programs? We're both in the state of Florida at the moment.
Yes.
Florida seems to be very focused on trying to eliminate woke from every level of public life, particularly education.
Yes.
And what do you think will be the prospective impact of what we might call right-wing thinking, anti-woke thinking on DE&I programs long term?
Well, my personal opinion is, regardless of the political bias, we should treat everybody with respect and dignity, and treat everyone with fairness, be just to everyone, regardless of their background, their orientation, or any other factor. In my classroom, that's what I try to exercise: treat everybody with respect. But things are maybe if we weaponize it in terms of political purpose, then things get complicated.
Yeah, things get very complicated then.
And I think one of the reasons why in Florida especially, the DEI initiatives are taking a U-turn, because I'm trying to articulate as best as I can. I'd like to come back to this discussion later.
Okay.
If
Well, I was going to offer my thoughts on the biggest challenges HR people face at the moment. And of course, I have been doing a lot of international travel lately. And during those travels, I've had opportunity to see and to reflect on differences between challenges in the US and those that I see occurring in the Middle East, in the Asia Pacific region, and so forth. And I see three major challenges, not just for HR, but for businesses and other organizations today. The first of those is problems with talent acquisition. In other words, recruiting people, not just good people, but any people to fill positions. So there is a common complaint among employers, not just in the US, but globally, that they can't find well-qualified people. So we hear that chorus of complaints everywhere in the world. A second complaint we hear is about high turnover everywhere in the world. And as a result, companies are scrambling to look for the talent to fill positions that were vacated due to fast turnover. Now, that turnover problem has existed in Asia Pacific for many years as China and other countries in the region have grown rapidly. They've faced often triple-digit turnover, 100% annual turnover in some organizations as a common business issue. But in recent years, it's gotten even worse. So that's a second issue. And then the third and final one that we see globally is problems with employee engagement. People, once they are hired, don't really want to work very hard. And that seems to be a complaint we hear in the US, we hear it in other parts of the world, and everyone speculates as to why those problems exist. And I've never heard anybody offer definitive answers, but I've heard many theories put forward about why there is such trouble recruiting people, retaining people, and engaging people. What do you think about what I just said? Do you agree or disagree or come down somewhere in the middle on my thoughts?
I completely agree with everything that you have mentioned. But there is one piece of observation that I would like to add, especially in the post-COVID area, post-COVID time. There has been an increased focus on employee wellness, not only on their physical wellness, but also on their mental wellness.
Right.
So, and especially in the aviation sector, pilots and air traffic controllers' mental health, mental wellness has gained a lot of attention in the recent years. So, you are correct. The issues surrounding hiring, onboarding, you mentioned about training and development. There are new technologies that have started to emerge, and HR has the need to adapt to this kind of new technologies. So those are the two additional comments that I would like to share.
Yeah, I would agree with you about the well-being issue. We know that there is a global epidemic of suicides that started during the pandemic, and that is a problem that has only escalated. It's gotten worse, and that is a mental wellness problem. So yes, the term I'm hearing used is well-being. Well-being, not referring just to physical, but mental and spiritual as well. And the spiritual side we can easily skip over, but I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about people feeling at ease with themselves and other people as a spiritual issue.
Yeah.
So it goes beyond the mental side to a feeling of connectedness with the world, with each other, with society, and so forth. So if people have been living at home as they did during the pandemic, many of them experienced a feeling of disconnectedness with the world, with themselves, and that led to problems with well-being. So what do you think are some best practices for businesses to ensure that they remain compliant with state and federal regulations around HR and associated ethical issues? Are there special best practices organizations can use?
Yes, so that goes, the first thing I would like to reiterate is being familiar with the federal and state level regulations that are mandatory for all HR professionals to uphold.
Right.
And HR professionals should promote this kind of, this knowledge should not be limited to HR professionals only. Every employee within the organizations should be familiar with at least the basic level of message these laws provide. So HR folks should help creating the policies and implementing the policies, raising awareness among the employees about these ethical perspectives, these the main message of each of these laws. In addition to that, there are some coaching standards that Society of Human Resource Management has some ethical code of ethics that are suitable for HR professionals. And in addition to that, International Coaching Federation, International Coaching Community, European Mentoring and Coaching Council. So there are a few other governing bodies. They have standard of ethics for their professionals. So they have good information and good foundation about these aspects. So we should be familiar with their values and ethical practices also.
I would agree with you about the importance of legal issues as a foundation of HR practice, and that it should be a matter of awareness, not just for HR people, but for managers too. But rarely do we see people trained on the laws affecting HR in their organizations. Years ago, I was asked by someone interviewing me over the phone for a radio show to give them on the spot a kind of a competency model of HR that I could explain. And of course, I was very familiar with SHRM's competency model for HR, but it's rather complex, and trying to describe it over the telephone in a minute or less is rather difficult. Same is true with the Association for Talent Development's competency, or what they now call capability model, for the field of talent development. So I said that there were 5 levels of competence for HR, and I was trying to be simplistic and yet elegant in my simplicity. The first level is awareness of legal issues affecting your organization with people. And of course, that gets complicated because in the US, we have a federal government, we have state governments, 50 of those, we have county and city governments, and then every day we have courts at all levels turning out court decisions that affect HR laws, rules, regulations, ordinances that affect the employment situation. But legal issues at the base. The second level would be awareness of HR generally. In other words, the person is familiar with the common chapters in a college HR textbook, and they know what those are. The third level would be specialization. If you're assigned to recruiting in HR, then you have a greater grasp of recruitment. The fourth level would be the business you're working for, awareness of the issues affecting the business, the special challenges with HR that line managers face. And then the fifth and highest level would be the ability to integrate all of those lower levels and offer practical solutions to workers, supervisors, managers, executives on HR challenges that come up minute by minute. That's kind of my view of the overview of what's needed in HR, every one of those levels. But it's complicated because if HR runs into a legal question, many legal departments in companies don't have the answer because the legal department of most major corporations are corporate lawyers, and they may have had one course on employment law, but many of them never had such a course. So HR is often the only one that has to focus on legal issues that relate to employment matters.
Yes.
Yet the legal staff may have to defend the company in court if there is a challenge due to employee relations questions. So that can be a real challenge. Okay, let's move to talking about the future. What do you see as the role of HR in the future? And particularly in regard to ethics, but as well as other challenges that HR may face. What's the future hold in store for HR?
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
I believe that in future, the role for HR professionals would consist of, for example, policy development and enforcement, both aspects in developing policy and also enforcing that policy. And more as new technologies are advancing, there needs to be increased requirement or for guidance. For example, over the last several years, the use of social media has skyrocketed when hiring new employees. Okay, now we have to. Publicly available information. Yes, a lot of companies have been using social media, the new candidate social media footprints, but we have to balance those initiatives in not to invade privacy. Okay, and also not to use any information that may cause discriminatory, which would be violating one of the federal or state laws. Okay, so there needs to be a very fine balance that need to be maintained for sure. So a lot of time, what HR professionals companies are doing is allowing third-party companies to conduct those kind of searches, and maybe use those searches towards the later part of the hiring process, not in the beginning. Okay. So definitely policy development and enforcement, HR people's role would be increasing even more in future. And in the advent of a lot of artificial intelligence, the HR world would also be proactive in creating policies and enforcing them for using artificial intelligence. Another significant role for HR professionals I foresee is having more effective communication among employees, between management and employees, and also increasing their engagement. Okay? So there are some research that says that the level of employee engagement is not as high as companies would prefer.
Right.
So increasing employees' engagement, the HR's role, I foresee to take more and more significant role in terms of increasing employee engagement. And so those are the two areas that I think the role of HRs is evolving, and it will be more significant in years to come.
We know in terms of ethics that every major corporation of the Fortune 500 has had at least one ethical scandal in the last 10 years. There's been at least one, and in some cases, many ethical scandals. And yet many of those companies have expressed codes of conduct, which are supposed to codify the behaviors that are permissible from the company standpoint.
Right. So I would say that in those cases, the enforcement piece was not executed. So they have all the policies that they came up, but when enforcing them, they fell short. Companies like Enron, WorldCom, back in early 2000s, and more recently, Boeing. Another example could be they had some oversight that caused accidents to those two 737 MAX.
What do you think about mandatory training for ethics?
It's I mean, you will get compliance.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a big university, Penn State. Every year they require us to go through an online program. It usually takes an hour.
Yes.
It's usually a 6-part program, and it talks about the ethical requirements for faculty around teaching, research, service, and other key areas like reporting child abuse if we observe it. And yet, I wonder what is the return on investment for compliance-related training when people are told you will be fired if you do not go through the compliance training, or you will be denied your pay raise if you do not go through the compliance-related training. What do you think about the ethics of that?
Well, I think by making these trainings mandatory, yes, better than nothing. So obviously there will be some positive return of those mandatory trainings, but these mandatory trainings by itself, in my opinion, are not going to solve the big problem. In that case, my suggestion would be using the transformational leadership or transformational coaching approaches, so that the employees, the HR department for sure, and the employees to transform their mentality so that the ethical practices get instilled. The employees are transformed to act ethically, even if there is no mandatory requirement. That would be the ideal solution, but it will take longer, and the senior leadership and definitely the HR people should make a diligent effort to use transformational leadership coaching components and principles so that employees commit to uphold these ethical requirements instead of just being compliant. So I think that would result in more desired behavior from the employees and also from the
the compliance mentality in HR seems to be at odds with the desire to create a welcoming corporate culture that supports well-being and diversity.
Yes, yes.
The
And
two of them seem to clash because if you tell people you will be fired if you don't go through mandatory training, that immediately sets up a strong resistance to it.
yes, yes,
People feel very angry at being forced to go through
supposed to be.
something,
Yeah,
even if they believe that the information is valuable, is useful, is probably necessary. They just don't like force being applied.
yes. And if we can, if leaders and definitely the HR people, if they can make those employees aware that look, your job is important, and these are the reasons why your job is important, and these are other reasons why acting ethically, behaving ethically is even more important. So a lot of time, the manager gives the employees a one page with all the job description, bulleted job description. There is barely any discussion of why each job is important and how each responsibility fits with the bigger organizational picture. So, I mean, if employees have a better understanding of what they need to do and why it is important and the level of significance of each of their duty, then they will be more receptive to attend these
Well,
trainings.
I agree with you. I think sometimes that compliance approach where management uses threats to get people to participate in required training
Yes,
is really lazy management because what they should be doing is explaining why that training is
yes.
necessary, but instead they revert to threats. And that
So,
leads to increased unionization, increased employee disengagement,
yes.
the likelihood of increased turnover and absenteeism. It makes people angry and rebellious.
So that I couldn't agree more. So, and from leaders' perspective and from HR's perspective also, the goal should be gaining the employee's commitment, not compliance. I mean,
Right.
when push comes to shove, then yes, they have to comply. But in the beginning, from leaders' side and also from HR side, the focus and the effort should be towards gaining employees' commitment, and that will, in my opinion, would result in more positive outcome.
It makes me think of an experience I had a few years ago in China with a multinational company. And I won't tell you which company, but I will say they were clearly a Fortune 50 multinational. And the training department of that company asked for my consulting advice on dealing with their company's ethical required training. And this company was, as I said, a multinational. The headquarters was in the US, but they had a big and growing presence in China. And headquarters in the US told the Chinese staff that they had to have everyone in the company go through mandatory classroom training on ethics once a year. And it was a 1 day program. So the training staff said to me, they set up the training like they did any other kind of training, and they signed up people to attend the training program. But when the days came for people to attend the mandatory ethics training, compliance training, people would come in and they had to sign up with a sign up sheet first thing. And they would say they would sign their name to show that they had attended the mandatory training. And then they said the problem was that about 15 minutes into the training program, a lot of cell phones would go off, would ring, and people would jump up and they would run out of the room to take a phone call. And they would indicate if they were challenged by the trainer that the phone call was from their boss about a business problem. And they'd run out in the hallway so that they would not disrupt the training. But then they would never return to the class. So they had already signed a form that indicated they had attended the full day of training, but they left the room at 15 minutes into the training and they were gone the rest of the day. So the training staff asked my advice. What should we do? So I said, well, you have several problems. I said, first problem is you shouldn't be having them sign the form at the beginning. The attendance form should be signed at the end of the full day. I said, secondly, who asked for this training? And they said, the CEO. I said, well, collect the names of the people who attended and the people who left and send those names directly to the CEO and explain who these people are. I said, I bet if you do that once and there is a follow-up from the CEO's office, this will never be a problem again. But I said, if there is no follow-up from the CEO's office, you've discovered that there is absolutely no commitment from the top of the company for ethics training. And that's also important to know.
And one thing I would have also pondered that why the CEO felt it necessary for those employees to go through this ethics training. Was there any unethical incident that took place that he or she wanted to avoid? Or in that case, I would assume that the CEO never explained the necessity for this training. In that, and that resulted the compliance mentality. So the employees wanted to do the bare minimum that would make them compliant with the requirement.
Right.
So that's and there are other ways that the CEO could have gained commitment from the employees instead of just comply, saying that those who would complete this mandatory training would get an extra day off.
Yeah, well, there could be some kind of reward.
Reward, yes.
Yeah.
And he could have also said that failing to meet or fully complete this training would result in not getting year-end bonus.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are many ways that the CEO could have achieved better participation from their employees.
Well, at the time, I also asked about the content of the training. I said, are you giving descriptions of rules? Are you quoting company policy and asking people to comply with that? Or are you describing actual situations where there is a conflict of interest or an actual situation that would be real world that actually happens in your company and work through how to deal with that ethical dilemma?
Yes.
I said, is this just quote the law, quote the policy, and then make people pass a test to show that they're aware of it? Or is this to show them how to apply the policy, apply the law to an actual gray area, a vague, confusing situation where it's not clear what the right answer is, but that probably came up for real in the company? I said, in my company, I gathered critical incidents about real ethical challenges that face the company. I did the classic questions by survey. Tell me a story about the most difficult ethical challenge you ever faced in your job in this company. What happened? Who was involved? What did you do? What happened as a result of what you did? And if you faced the same situation again, how would you handle it and why? I said, if you collect those kind of critical incidents from your employees and then apply qualitative research analysis to it to identify, boil down the categories where people are facing real ethical challenges, and then you apply company policies and laws to the actual problems people are experiencing, that this will be a lot more useful, engaging training for the employee than simply quoting laws and policies, which will be very boring.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned about the critical incident technique. And I would further even go to propose that this critical incident method be used diligently by each manager when evaluating their subordinates' performance, be it quarterly or yearly or semi-annual performance review. So, and the concept and the questions of ethics and fairness should be should be addressed during their performance evaluation also.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, that's one of my main complaints about the nature of many performance management systems today. Many of them in multinational companies are in two parts. Part one focuses on results as measured by key performance indicators and how well people achieved against their KPI targets. And then the second part of the performance management form centers around behaviors, and those come from competency models from the level of that worker. And then we assess behaviors, but what we forget about are two other important areas. One of those is ethical alignment to company requirements, and the other one is value alignment to company values. And
Absolutely.
ethics and values are not identical.
No.
The values go to what our company considers important.
Yes.
Ethics goes to what we consider right and wrong, legal and illegal.
Yes.
And that's a big difference. But we focus on only results and behaviors, and we forget about ethics and values. So that suggests that we end up with promoting criminals into management jobs because we never look at their ethics.
I would believe that it would be beneficial if those core values can be ingrained in the job description to begin with.
Yeah.
For example, integrity, respect, responsibility, sportsmanship, servant leadership. Those are those are 5 core values. I'm sure you're familiar with the Champions of Character initiative. So those are 5 core values. And I have seen some companies try to ingrain these 4 values in their job description.
Okay,
So
that would be good.
When the candidates or new they read their job description, they say, oh, you know what? In order to complete this task, I have to show responsibility. I have to be responsible. In completing this task, I have to treat others the way I want to be treated. So if they have an understanding of what kind of core values are essential when they read what they need to do, then automatically there is a chance that they will perform according to those values.
Well, competencies can be measured by behaviors.
Yes.
Values can be measured by behaviors, and ethics can be measured by behaviors. But they're not identical behaviors. They're very different depending on the values we prize, the ethics that we need to demonstrate, and the results or performance that we're tasked to accomplish.
Yes.
So my concern about traditional corporate performance management systems is that they focus on too limited information. They focus only on results and behaviors associated with the results.
Yes.
So that means people focus on getting the work accomplished, even if it's illegal and immoral.
So, and I find the concepts of ethics and justice, the one of the core places that it needs to be addressed is in creating the job description, job specifications as the sub processes of job analysis.
Right.
That would be one of the very beginning. So if you ask for my recommendation how to move forward, companies who want to ingrain ethics and justice in their organization, one of the first places to address is to do a thorough job design and ingrain these ethical components in the job description itself.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Of course, the basic theory of HR is everything starts with job analysis and the job description. And to that, we can add the competency models, which go to describing the human beings who do those jobs well. We describe the human beings who do that work.
Yeah.
So, and those will be different kinds of human beings depending on the type of work.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, this is the future. And I think there will be increasing need to focus on the ethical and values issues going forward. So those are some of our future challenges. Do you see any others, any other future challenges around ethics?
When we are talking about ethics, we definitely need to keep bias and culture in mind. Okay, so in some culture, what is ethical may not be ethical in another culture.
Oh, that's excellent. That's a very good point. And it has to be, especially with a multinational company,
Yes.
where they are dealing with global requirements. They have
Mhm.
to be sensitive to local requirements as well.
Yes. Yes. So
And
I mean, uh, by no means these are simple issues. These are very complex and it needs due diligence from all parties involved. And raising this awareness, I see one of the most critical role for HR professionals.
well, as artificial intelligence, uh, as it develops, it's in its infancy at the moment.
Yes.
As artificial intelligence develops, do you foresee new ethical challenges emerging as a result of businesses using artificial intelligence?
Yes. Now, we have to be very careful, for what purpose these these systems, these systems would be used. And one thing we have to, my understanding is that these artificial intelligent or smart systems, they do not have any ethical, they don't know what is ethics or
Right.
what is good, what is not good. That's why you will see that a lot of generative AI students write papers by using artificial intelligence systems. But a lot of time, the sources that the system gives does not exist,
Right.
non-existent sources. The system does not care whether it is right or wrong. They, they, they will give you an output.
But if we make hiring and firing decisions
Mhm.
based on bad information coming from
Yes.
AI because of lazy humans that won't check that AI results,
I,
then we have a big problem.
and there is another thing I'll share with you. Amazon, few years back, they wanted to create an artificial system to identify hiring qualities, or what kind of candidates to hire. Now, each artificial intelligence system needs data to make itself familiar with. To gain the intelligence, it needs data. So
Yeah.
in that case, what Amazon did, the resumes that they used to create their intelligent system, they were all resumes of male executives. So it did not have any minority executive resume in their. Uh,
And you realize research indicates that 25% of resume data is exaggerated or
Exaggerated.
false.
Yes, yes. So imagine if Amazon used the recommendation or the suggestion of that intelligent system that whose test data consisted of only male CV.
Terrible.
You won't
Well,
get
that's
so
a classic example of lazy humans doing it stupidly, and then we end up with an AI system that
yes,
magnifies that quality and makes matters even worse.
yes.
Well, let me ask you a closing question now that we are close to the end of our time. What advice would you like to give other HR professionals in going forward into the future regarding ethical practices? What final words of wisdom would you offer?
Well, due to the lack of federally mandated ethical guidelines in the areas of HR, I would say the next best source for HR professionals would be to review the SHRM, so Society of Human Resource Management, and HCI, Human Capital Institute, their code of ethics or code of standard guidelines.
Okay.
So that would be a good start. Puts it. I think it would put the HR professionals in the right mindset towards acting ethically and fairly in this very critical field of human resource.
I would offer some closing advice as
Absolutely.
well. First thing would be not to let the lawyers take over the issue of ethics. The HR should have a hand, a voice in developing ethical standards and in ethical investigations of employee behavior and misbehavior. So it's important because lawyers tend to look at the legal requirements only.
Yes.
They do not consider the business implications of the decisions they make. And HR is more sensitive, or should be more sensitive, to those business-related decisions. So, Sohel, I want to thank you very much for participating in this interview. You've been an excellent interviewee. And again, you're Sohel Imroz. My name is Bill Rothwell, and I thank our listeners for participating and listening to us today in this podcast. Thank you all very much.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now